I'll just start. Great. I've started recording, guys. Yeah, so welcome back. We were discussing the stories of Cain and Abel, and then we went into the story of Romulus and Remus. There was an interesting question asked about, has any brother killed for an approval of a parent? In my previous mathematical session, I had spoken about the separation of earth and sky, where like they were father, sky is a father and earth is a mother. And at many times, there have been stories where ultimately, whenever one of the children has tried to separate the father, the brother felt enraged at the fact that their parents were separated, so they've kind of waged war many times, on command of the father and all. So there are stories. In fact, at some level, the next story we're going to talk about that's going to have this element. Um, Let me just share the screen. Uh, are you able to see it?
Yes.
I think I'll just keep it like this. Okay, so I'll tell the story first, and then I'll talk about some of the aspects of the stories, which where it comes from. The story is of Manu versus Yemo. Now, when we say the name Manu, and when I say Yem, you know, uh, a certain type of image comes in mind, right? Manu is that primordial first being who rescued Matsya from the river and became the progenitor of all men. There are multiple Manus across different stories and all, right? Manu has every age has had its own Manu after every. Just 1 second, sorry. Sorry, yeah, there was a little bit of disturbance. So there have been many Manus across the across many yugs. And while Yam is this god of Dharma, he's Dharmaraj, who always comes when someone is dying. So what's their connection? I mean, we've never heard of a story where both of them have actually featured in the same Puranic or any of the later on stories. Turns out that there's a story older than the Puranas and all, a story where history, mythology gets dissolved into this obscure nature of time. Here's an older version images which kind of bring that thing. What you're seeing here is this picture of Yamantaka in Tibet, which has a similar feature, the idea of a man riding a bull looking fierce, while uh, a similar figures which seem like the first man, the Manas, and the different names for it, and this person's name, Manas, Manov. So finally, if we trace back enough, there's a story of Man or Manu and his brother Yemo. Now the story starts off when the sky father Dayas Pitra and the earth father, the Prithvi Matra, had two children. They were the divine twins. One was Manu, the other one was his twin. He didn't have a name at first, but the word twin somehow got translated into Yem or Yemo. Now, Yemo, with his brother, explored the cosmos. This was the cosmos before any sort of creation that existed before. Both of them were enthralled by the concept of existence. Yemo especially just loved being alive. To be able to see the void being filled with so many cosmic realms and all was just something he loved. Yemo knew that he wanted to live as long as he could. His brother, on the other hand, had an idea. His brother wanted to build something. He wanted to create. Yemo found that very interesting. Yemo asked Manu that, I think that's a good idea. How can we go, how can we go about this? Manu didn't answer him. They kept exploring the cosmos, flying from one end to the other. Many times, Yemo would notice that his brother Mano would be speaking to the Dyaspitra and his mother. There were a couple of other divine creations. There was a storm god. He had a name like Indra, and he always noticed that Mano used to speak a lot to them. He never knew what they were talking about, though. He was just enthralled by the idea of experiencing existence. But he was thinking a lot more about it, and he liked the idea that if they could create, if more people, more beings could experience this creation, this cosmic reality. He turned to Mano and asked him that, brother, when can we begin our creation? When can we begin this project that we have planned? Mano first didn't answer him. Then he just quietly spoke, life requires life. Yemo didn't understand that. Life requires life? What did he mean by that? Mano turned to his brother, and for the first time, Yemo realized that his brother was not looking at him with the same wonder that he always did. His brother, Mano, was looking at him with a sense of remorse, a sense of stillness. He wasn't sure what his brother was thinking, but he knew that it wasn't good. This this was going to be a moment that he was going to regret and remember. All he heard before the incident that happened was his brother saying, "I'm sorry, but this ought to be." And with that, his brother lunged onto him, killing him. He wasn't alone. In all that massacre, in all that stabbing, he noticed that his father was standing right behind him. He tried to move his hand, but he noticed that the storm god Indra and the fire god Agni were already holding him. They kept killing him. He was dying. The person who wanted to experience life was having life taken up from him. And soon enough, he breathed his last. From his body, his body, strange things started emerging out. From his mind came the moon. From his eyes came the sun. From his head came the skies. And from his legs came the earth. And soon enough, the cosmos began to be filled. Yemo knew he was dead, but he was able to see all this. He was able to see the creation. The only thing is he didn't have any autonomy on choosing how he wanted to experience it. Soon enough, through his death and through this creation, a strange thing started happening. A third being called Trito came out. And Trito was given the responsibility of handling the cosmic cow. Now, the cosmic cow didn't have a name, not yet, at least. But Trito was using the cow to nourish himself and the rest of the people. This cosmic cow was something that was treasured by the beings that were alive. Yemo himself had retreated into a new realm where he saw the creation that came out of his body, having lived a span of his existence, coming back to him. He was told that this plane was called death, and this realm where he was going to reside was called the underworld. Soon enough, in the other world where the life was thriving, strange things started happening. There was a new creature that had come in. Some said it looked like a serpent, and it stole the cosmic cow. Trito was really upset, and Trito decided to reach out to the storm god Indra, who always used to like being intoxicated. Intoxication helped Indra get certain powers, and then thus began a lot of all the gods trying to invoke Indra, asking him to rescue the cow and to ensure that sustenance lives on. Indra had the intoxicating drink, and soon enough went into the realm, broke through the serpent, killing it, and rescuing the cow, bringing back some sense of order. Yemo was noticing all this happening. He also started realizing that his death was inevitable. His death had to come for life to begin. But at the same time, he also knew that for new life to begin, more death had to happen. He took up the responsibility of ensuring that he takes an account who's dying and who isn't. Manu, he looked up, had now become the first man and the first priest who ultimately used this sacrifice as a way to maintain the cosmic balance. Manu and Yemo never spoke again. And soon enough, with time coming to us, with time being created, these two characters seem to have never met again. And that's the story of how Manu killed Yemo. Yeah, so before we go into this, anyone has any questions? I'm pretty sure you must have felt a very strange this thing. The story itself was very strange, right?
I've heard a version of the story connected to the sun god. It was very interesting to see this. This is a more layered version of it, but there it was more about how his wife sets a clone in her place, and
Yeah.
he instead has. And so one of them is actually his illegitimate child, and the other is his own, and all of that's there. So
It's
yeah,
fascinating.
yeah, pretty cool stuff.
No, I think that's fascinating, and I would say that I know the story you're talking about because when I came about this, I remember the names that I've said, and I'll be really honest. I've taken a little bit of creative liberties in connecting the plot points. The story is not written anywhere in a very specific way. It's actually bits and pieces, and I'm going to talk about this. I took some creative liberty to just bring in some of the motivations that are inferred. Even the names, like as you said, when I say the storm god, in many other versions, it's the sun god. And the names itself, Indra, Agni, even Surya, are interchangeable. And that this is something that happens even in the Vedas. Vedas
Yeah.
are even more confusing. So it gets even more sort of a thing. So you have to understand this story comes before the Vedas. I mean,
Yeah.
if you have fragments to play with, here there are fragments you don't even know if they're belonging to the right puzzle. Uh, so yeah, that's the story that came in, and it's interesting that was saying. And I remember a lot of people asking me when I had sent the promotions that I've never heard of Manu having a brother. In fact, there was a very interesting discussion I had with a couple of people who were talking about, like, which Manu are you talking about? And I think I have to be very clear about the fact that this is a Manu earlier than the Manus that we generally talk about. Uh, and yeah, I'll get to the origin of it, and I think that was something that I wanted to bring in.
uh, Allegorically also this is very interesting because Manu is can be visualized as the first person and as in the beginning, and Yam can be witnessed as the end, so it is allegorically also very nice.
That's true. I think, and I find that very fascinating. That the first man and the first death are actually, like, brothers. It's like I mean, given the fact that man, the sense of anthropomorphism we have, that humans and man itself means life. It's there. So I'll talk about the where it comes from. Now, this story comes from Proto-Indian European mythology. It's a bit of a mouthful, Proto-Indian European mythology. Where did Europeans come from in this sort of a thing? But the truth of the matter is that this is where a little bit of history and a little bit of geology will really help in the other thing. Humans by themselves, now, getting away from mythology, but just by the evidence-based the narrative right now we have, humans came from Africa. The humans, the earliest tracing of humans is around 300 hominids. I mean, obviously it's 300 BC and all, but modern human beings are like around just maybe 100,000 years, and soon enough they started spreading around, right? Now, as humans spread around, they didn't go into like a very straight direction. I mean, humans were exploring. They kept going into new places, establishing, living there, and then their descendants went further ahead. What happens is that, but how do we know this? How do we end up finding these things out? The thing is, if you look at all the stories and then you start tracing it back, which is with a method called comparative, this is called a comparative method, which is where you start comparing similar sounding words, similar sounding stories, and then you trace it back one by one. Very similar to how evolutionary science works, where you look at creatures and then you look back and you try to say if they had an ancestor and all. So if you look back further enough, what we find out is that the Vedas, the Roman stories, the Norse stories and all have some sense of commonalities. And if you look at the time itself, the area that comes in is this area which is around, Russia and Turkey area, the Yamana culture. That's the culture that they called it name. And what you're seeing right now is the spread in which Indo-European migrants spread across. What's interesting is the spread itself happened around 4000 to 1000 BC. And that's the time where we see the build up. If you think about the Vedic stories and all, the Vedic age itself is around 2000 BC and later. Lot of commonalities and similarities are same. What's very, very important to understand is that these stories, what I'm telling you, is not a direct association. You don't have a book, or you don't have a scripture, or you don't have any source that says it. These are actually constructed by the scholars of comparative mythologies, looking at multiple stories and finding commonalities enough to start, making it's almost like a theme. And the theme is so strong that you can almost make a sort of a new version of a story by itself. Just to give you an idea, like how does that happen? How does the language itself begin? Now, if you look at it, Sanskrit, the word of two, dua, people have actually done a tracing of it. So if the word in Hindi is do, and then in Sanskrit is dua. So the same way, if you trace back, you find like a area which is the Proto-Indo-European itself. Proto-Indo-European itself breaks down into smaller clusters. So there is a Proto-Indo-Aryan place. Indo-Aryan is the one that has Sanskrit as a language, as one of its descendant language. But when we say this, we don't mean that you have to understand this is when it's a parent-child relation, there's a lot of give and take. It's almost like something evolves from the thing. Tony Joseph, a very interesting author, talks about the idea of pizza. Think of all these spreads, all these migrations, almost like a pizza base. So, first you have the bottom base of bread, then someone is spreading the sauce, and then the cheese comes in, then you have these toppings. What you're actually experiencing at the end when you take a bite is the full thing. So you're not really experiencing a different thing. When you're saying Sanskrit, you are already experiencing a lot of Proto-Indo-European aspects of things. When you're experiencing Hindi, you're already experiencing Sanskrit and the other aspects. And I think what's important to understand is that there's enough of the evidence to say that there were people who were Proto-Indo-Europeans. We don't have a name for them. We don't have too much of, like evidence from this thing. We have artifacts and all that do come back, that do attest to it. And I want to talk about one thing that commonalities come out. If you look at different mythologies and this thing, the one thing that comes out. So one of the things is that if you look at even the names itself, the way the names go and break down further and further. Even Proto-Indian, it's called Man or Manu. Yam was a word for twin. The primordial cow was the first mammal that's always used. And in Indian, it becomes Manu or Purush. Yam becomes Yama. And Manu has a bull in many of the stories. In the Vedic stories, he has a bull also. The Vedic gods are there instead of the sky father and those ones that's there. So right now what I told you, the story that actually comes somewhere between this and this, the Indian version of the European thing. So what I kind of did was an Indian retelling of the Proto-Indo-European itself. And I took some creative liberties before anyone asks that question. But if you look down, what's interesting is like, with the, in Iranian stories or Germanic or Roman stories, Manu is also sort of traced back to being Romulus. Remus comes from Yemos, and the first mammal ends up becoming a she-wolf out here. So what many of the scholars believe, and obviously this is still a debate going on, is that many of these stories were repackaged as the older stories were repackaged in a way to tell new stories. So the Roman story that you're hearing is actually a repackaging of the story you heard, the last story itself. And I want to point out a very interesting thing. So if you trace back these kind of multiple stories that are happening back.
I just wanted to, I had a question before you move on.
Yeah.
So this story that you told, the last story, is from, you wrote, it's from Tibetan legend, right?
No, it's not Proto-Indian European. It's not from a specific thing. It's probably the story that had happened in that region, which could have been the ancestor of all the other stories.
In the Tibetan region?
No, not Tibetan. This is in in Turkey and this region. This region, this Yamana culture. This area I think is the Caspian Sea and the Black Sea. That area. This
okay, because the story there's exactly the same story in Semitic religion also. Where the Yam is the son of the supreme god El. And he grows a tyrant. His name is Yam only, and then he's a giant. And then the sun kills him, and from his body he makes the mountains and the rivers, and from the hair there's an elaborate description of which part of the earth becomes from his body, which is very. So the sun's name is Baal, Baal, Baal. So Supreme God is El, whose son is Yam. Yam is then killed and divided into various parts of the earth by this young son called Baal, which is very similar to the story of Manu, where Manu's body is destroyed by Brahma to create all the pieces on earth as well. So there's a lot of similarities. So that's another point I wanted to add in your comparative mythology, that which story came first before which is again that's historic fact, but similarities are there.
Definitely. I think that's fascinating, Sandeep. I mean, I did not know about this. It does make sense because the fact that Manu was killed, in fact, the idea of killing of Prajapati in Hindu mythology feels like so the thing is, when you're looking at comparative mythology, it's also a little bit of a guesswork. You start looking at the story and you're like, this looks like a later addition, or this looks like you've kind of sanitized some of the aspects of it. Some confusion have gone off.
Oh, of course, yes. They are very, very much a reaction to the culture, how it changes.
Exactly.
How the goddesses have been domesticated over the period of time is a proof of that, right?
Definitely.
And so how many times those character stories have been altered? We don't even know even the purest story is the purest. There could be a version before that as well. Okay, all right, that's all. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a fascinating thing, and I think the story of the tree itself is something that tells you something about like a culture that could have been. I want to point out this last the main thing which I wanted to get at is that if you look at some of the stories that are common, and across Indian mythology, the fact that this thing, the first one, the Great Flood, we always talk about the Noah flood, the biblical flood, I mentioned the Babylonian flood. There are so many floods, right? It's almost like every story has been traced back. So in the Proto-Indian variant, the Proto-Indian European variant, one of the stories that is common is the Great Flood. The other story that is very common is the fire stealing. Even in Vedas, there is a story of the fire stealing happening. The third one, another one that comes in is the idea of a storm god, a god that controls thunder, fire, sort of a thing, fighting a serpent. Then there's a story of the world parents, the idea of earth, sky, and earth, the earth's father and the sky mother, or the other way around. And today we spoke about man and a twin. There is another story that is there is about the cosmic egg, which a lot of us know. There is a story in Indian mythology, in the Hindu mythology. There's a story in the Greek mythology. There's a story in Egyptian mythology. Um, Something which I have not taken. If anyone's keeping count, I have not done a mathematical session of that. In fact, that was something I had planned to do, and I was debating between the two of man and twin versus the cosmic egg. It's something I also didn't realize it for a long time when I was, when I was actually looking at the comparison thing, that the variants that I'm actually ended up, having sessions on are the stories that were part of the Indo-European stories. And by talking about them, telling the three different stories and all, and showing the commonalities, you're kind of getting a taste of, okay, there definitely was someone who got, there was a time when a god ended up flushing the world, and there was someone who survived. The story of fire getting stolen and given to someone. There's a story of a serpent killing someone, and you automatically feel like you have an idea that these guys valued this. That's something that's it's very apparent there, and I think this should also give you an idea of what the next mathematical session is going to be itself, which is going to be in the cosmic egg. I want to point out one last thing, and then I'll just leave it open to the floor. What's interesting in these three stories, and if you look at it, the direction of the historicity of it, the story goes back. I mean, Manu and Yamo must have come much earlier than that. Must have come around 4,000, or a lot older, maybe 10,000 years old, sort of a thing. Also, whenever these people, the Indo-European people lived. Romulus and Remus is 7,500 BC, and Cain and Abel is the Bible story. So it's definitely something that has come around the Torah and the Bible itself getting composed in the first century and all. What's interesting is the moral ambiguity of it is kind of more and more the further you go. Manu's reason of killing Yemo is not very clear. I mean, you can embellish it with the story itself, but why did it have to kill Yemo? Why not another god? It's not very clear. Even Romulus and Remus, the fight itself, okay, you had a disagreement. I mean, the idea that you killed someone for it just seems slightly the same. And people, Romulus went on to live normal, happy life, right? It's not like, he did something that he was punished for it. But Cain was almost punished for it. It was almost seen as it's a very, violent and sinful act. So, if you look at some of the ideas in the sibling concept itself, the idea of a slaughtering of a sibling comes from this idea where it's either evoked by envy, it's evoked by some sort of ego, or it's evoked by a very enigmatic sense of feelings. But all the three ended up doing this to establish a norm. They were doing it with a sense of entitlement. They did it because they felt that they had to create, they had to do. Cain went on to create a land, city and all, and then ultimately that went on. Romulus created a city that is still existing in some ways, and Manu kind of created, the world. So that's something that's interesting. And conversely, what's also interesting is the autonomy of the victims itself. While Abel is not very, in the stories also, he does something, but when he's killed, he's dead. And, even the reason he dies, there's not enough stories of resistance. Remus still ends up fighting. There's a concept of fight happening between the two. Guillermo, what's interesting in the stories and if the reconstruction and all, is that he becomes the first god of death. And ultimately he keeps in track, he keeps the checks and balances of life and death. So what's really interesting about this idea of the civilization itself is built on blood. The idea that you have to kill something close, and I think it goes back to the fact that the idea of killing a brother is seen as a sinful, a very a bad act, right? But I think what mythologies are trying to show is that any act of creation has to begin with a sense of violence, and creation of life or the sustenance of life happens only when something close is dead. But conversely, what's also important is that in all these stories, the reason they ultimately stick with us is because what they end up telling us is how betrayal, the concept of being betrayed, because in all three of them, they do get betrayed in some sense or the other, can happen from someone you kind of trust. And that is the essence of the this mathematical session. So thank you, everyone. Is there any questions? Sorry, I'm seeing a timing again. I didn't realize that it's going to be cut off again. But yeah.
I actually had a question. So this session really reminded me of this one poem that we had learned in school in Hindi called Sammilit, I think, which was about essentially the poet goes to like a barren land where there are like two trees standing. And I think it's like a drumstick tree and a mango tree or something. And people keep telling him, you can't go there. It's a cursed land and don't go. And he finally finds out it's because there were two brothers who fought over that land, killed each other, and in their place grow these two trees, which are now, in complete unison and completely in love, almost like they regret what happened. And the entire what he takes away from this entire encounter with people is that you need to let go of whatever, let bygones be bygones, and sort of like move on and celebrate life. So I was just wondering, is there any sort of mythological story where two brothers actually kill each other instead of just one killing the other and then going through a punishment or something?
I mean, I haven't come across. I've come across stories where, like, finally both brothers end up killing each other, and one of them gets wounded and all. I haven't come across any stories where both of them dies together. But I'm pretty sure they will be, because in the idea of, I mean, if you think about, like, I don't know about killing, but I know that two brother-like figures have almost defeated each other and they realize sort of a thing. So the story of Gilgamesh has this idea where Gilgamesh meets Enkidu, who's his opposite, and they fight, and they ultimately both of them are not able to defeat each other, so they realize that they should be, like, and then they become brothers, and the entire adventure is about how they go as brothers until Enkidu is killed. So there are stories like that where, like, some two people fight and they realize it. If you think about it, where so many of the stories, there are stories where we have in Indian mythology also Vishnu and Shiva fighting, or the three gods fighting themselves. Ultimately it stopped. Like, there's a time where, like, the Shiv Dhanush and the Vishnu Dhanush, they both are about to start the war. But Brahma comes and intervenes and asks them to stop, because it will mean that even if one of them wins, it will mean the annihilation of the world. So the theme of two people fighting and, like, almost defeating each other or stopping before they defeat, everything gets destroyed, is definitely there. But I would love if you can also find some stories like that, like, let me know. I mean, I can't think on top of my head if there are particular stories that this exactly happens.
Yeah. Actually, you were mentioning this whole Vishnu and Shiva thing reminds me of Civil War, how Captain America and
Oh, definitely. I think that's
so that's essentially what happens.
Definitely, yeah. So guys, I'm seeing this thing. I think the Zoom call is going to end again. But no worries, if it ends, we can just join in quickly if there's anyone questions. And this thing, we have a couple of announcements also to make about the future, what we're going to do. So we can just do that. So here it's sacrifice is still prevalent. Absolutely right. This thing. Yeah, that's really true. Sacrifice is still prevalent, and the desire is something that leads to crime. And I think in all three of them there was a desire, and it led to something that was almost like a crime. So that was definitely there. Let's stop.